Hey, what's up? This is Cage. You're watching the BeeShine. I used to listen to Red Alert, Molly Mall, Mr. Magic, Big Daddy Kane, EPMD, KRS-One, you know, all the 80s shit. I remember listening to WBLS and Mr. Magic, and listening to Kane, and like the whole Juice Crew was up there, and you know, I was a big fan of all that, and I just remember hearing them all on there. It was like this camaraderie, and they were all just like spitting verses, and you know, I remember I was glued to it, and that would be the same thing many years later with Stretch and Pop, where I would be standing in my apartment, you know, holding like a wire, trying to get the signal to come in perfectly. And the same thing, I think I remembered that technique to listen to 89.9 from when I used to listen to like WBLS, because I lived upstate New York at the time. So there's like, you know, signal would come in and out, and you're trying to make like tapes and shit. That was like a big moment for me, where I realized I was like obsessed, where I had to have like the newest shit. And I remember I was like really obsessed with what was one of all like the Shan and KRS beef, and then you had like Poet and all those getting in. Here's a nice old one, as a Mighty Midski, rapping comedian. Do you remember him? Ha. That's one that I always pull out. You don't remember that? He just kind of like jumped in the mix and had like a diss song, and they played it a lot. It was Brooklyn blew up the bridge, South Bronx helped us out. That was how the chorus was like cut up. They cut up all the all those records or whatever. I got out of a mental hospital when I was 18, and then like within 6 months, I got out, and all my friends at the time had like moved on. Everybody had like little rap groups, and I was just convinced that I think it was more of a revenge thing. Like people I grew up with, you know, it was like, I'll show you, you know, little kid, you know, I'll show you. I'm gonna go off and become like a big rap star or something. Of course, everyone thought I was like out of my mind. Like, yeah, sure you are. You're white. You're crazy. And of course that was, you know, you had Vanilla Ice, but he wasn't credible. You had Third Base, and then you had like Everlast, and Third Base, you know, and Everlast, and then after that it was just kind of not a lot of, you know, Beastie Boys, you know. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, you know. I was fresh out of a fucking mental hospital. I dropped out of high school in a mental hospital. So I went with it, and because everyone doubted me, that kind of like drove it. And so I just made tons of demos. That was back when like people used to send demo tapes to record labels, you know. You just blindly put your music on like a tape and just ship it off somewhere. And I'll never forget, I remember being in like a Daddy Reef's office when he worked for Big Beat. And I remember being there, and I remember Artifacts were signed to Big Beat, and I'll never forget when he offered me a stack of demo tapes if I needed any blank tapes. And somewhere in the back was just died on the inside, because I was like, God damn, that's what happened to my shit, you know? I don't really recall. I know I used to have to go to like a lot of parties and open mics and do all that shit, sending out demos, and of course nothing came from any of that. But I knew I had a friend that was friends with a friend that knew Pete Nice, and so I made some demos, and he was just gonna release it on a indie label that he had called Do or Die Records. But he played it for Pete and Bobito. They had Fondlem Records. Fondlem Records. They had Hoppo Records. And I went down to New York and I met them, And I only had like one or two songs, so I just had my book and I was just like playing shit, just like spitting verses for them. And then they signed me to like a single deal, and that obviously didn't I didn't put a record out on Hoppo. The Hoppo thing was kind of like almost behind me. I don't think 6 months out of a mental hospital you're ready to like take on like a Columbia record deal and like make. Yeah, I had no idea how to even like my song structures. I didn't know how to write songs really. I knew what I wanted, but so I would just be on KCR all the time, just kind of like spitting verses, and then the Necro thing came about because he sampled my voice, a line from one of my demos in his demo, or it was something like that. The line was like, "The more the blood, the merrier," or something like that, and I was like, "Oh shit, that was cool." I'd never heard anyone use sample my voice. It's kind of like a, at that point, like Slick Rick was probably the most sampled voice like in rap at the time, and I had always the Clockwork Orange thing was. I read the book of Clockwork Orange when I was in Stony Lodge, and I related to it. I was 15. He's 15 in the book, experimenting on him, all this shit. I was out of my head. I was like, this book is about me. Like, I can't, And then, one of the staff was like, you got to see the movie. So, of course, I couldn't watch it in there. So when I got out, I was like, I have to see this movie. As soon as I saw the movie and I heard the music, I was like, that's it. That's going to be my first song. And, you should sample a Clockwork Orange. It took a while to get it right, and I remember DJ Riz at the time, it was like a time stretch issue, and nobody really knew how to do that, and it wasn't like a common thing at that point, like with a lot of producers, like you're just kind of like looping shit, and like, but I wanted the whole thing. I didn't just want just the first, couple of bars. I wanted the whole, and he hooked it up, and, he played bass on it, came out great. The first version I had was just I just had the loop of it. Like he had just hooked up the loop so I could write to it. And then, I was at work. I was working at Burger King. And I was writing it there. And I kept putting it in my headphones when it would slow down. I put the headphones on and wrote it. So I wrote it on a Whopper rap. And I remember when the record came out, I didn't have, any info. So like I wanted to put the Burger King number on the record as like contact info. And it was funny because it was like afterwards I was like still working there, and like people were trying to like book me for shows, which I didn't know how to play shows either. They were trying to book me for shows, and it'd be like, hey, Burger King, and it'd be like, yeah, can I talk to Cage? And then like, oh yeah, sure, he's here. My manager was cool with letting me take my calls there, and I think I got my first check was for like 3 G's or something like that, and I was like, I'm quitting Burger King, I just made fucking 3 G's writing this little ass fucking thing on a Whopper rap or whatever, and 3 G's to me back then was a lot of money. I don't have a lot of family. My mother thought I was nuts. Even when I brought her a record, it didn't impress her. She still thought it was ridiculous. She didn't understand. It's like, I'm like, no, this is my record. Look, I did it. This is my first record. She didn't give a shit. She was just kind of like, yeah, that's nice, She's like, but what are you going to do with your life? And I'm like, no, I got, and even like when I went out and got like an apartment and started like living off of it, it still was, you should really do something with your life, Not listening to people, not letting people control me. I've always had this, cut my nose, spite my face kind of career moves, Cut my nose off, shoot both feet, hobbling around in this business. And I remember a lot of people were like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this, I think I fell victim to like believing in this ode and this code of hip hop, and which ended up not really, for the most part, like being like a real thing, and I was real young, I was impressionable, and I was very anti mainstream and didn't really want anything to do with that. And I find myself in these like situations, and then at that time it seemed like everybody's kind of like writing the same couple of songs, trying to get on Hot 97, or like that was like it. I was like, but that wasn't really. It would be nice, but that wasn't where I was trying to go. I wasn't trying to, At that point, it was like, yo, I sold fucking 20,000 pieces of vinyl. I was like, all I got to do is just, I made 10 G's off this song, and I made like, 20 grand off this single. All I got to do is make like fucking 3 singles a year. I got a fucking, career off like, that was our album back then. You put one vinyl single out, it's like, career highlights. I mean, as far as like, back then, like getting like my first check for like, I don't know, like 20 grand or something like that, and being like fucking like, it was like fucking, you give like a fucking 21-year-old a fucking, a check for $100,000 or something today. It's like, to me, I'd never seen that much money before, and all I did was just say a bunch of fucked up shit, and so that was cool. Career highlight was getting in a fucking U-Haul, getting my first apartment, renting a U-Haul. I had no furniture. I rented a U-Haul, and I went furniture shopping, and I put all my furniture in the back of the fucking U-Haul, and then I went out and bought a car, and I sat in my fucking house, in my apartment, and fucking, looked around, and it was the first time I felt that I accomplished something. I just wrapped this movie called Paint It Black in December. That's huge for me. And in February last year, I did this horror film called Spring, and I got to kind of revisit my my younger self. If I had grown up in San Diego, like Gold Fronts and the whole shit, and it was cathartic for me because I got to like experience like what it would be like had I just kept doing drugs and just kind of never evolved as a person. And wow, this is what I would have been had I stayed on the drug path. And it's something I never planned for or even imagined, and so to get there from like, again, go back to like paying my bills and going and getting an apartment and like being able to live off of it, was just inconceivable to me. Like there was no way that could happen. So if some young kid had a similar path that I had, and it's happened countless times where someone tells you that your music helped them. And I remember being younger, being like, the fuck out of here. Like, I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. But then, like, later on, someone telling me that it definitely made an impact on me, to where it's like, oh wow, somebody's getting like, I didn't have people to really like help me through like a lot of the madness that I was like going through, and a lot of the rage and the anger and resentment that I had, and I didn't have people there. Whatever I had was the music. So I just poured everything I had into the music. And then, so if I could help somebody, keep from like, cutting themselves to ribbons like I used to, or contemplating suicide or something like that, that means far more to me than, someone telling me you're dope or someone's fucking opinion, because that means nothing to me.